Axis and Allies Stalingrad. Is it even better than North Africa? Let's find out. As always, I'm going to run by you the things I like about the game, the things I dislike about the game, and the things I found missing to be missing in action. The things that I like, I've indicated by putting a green die next to it. The things that I don't like, I've indicated by putting a red die next to it. And the things that I found to be missing in action, I've indicated by placing a single ochre die next to it. As you can see, in many cases, I ran out of green dice and I've had to put some ochre ones next to it, but those are things that I do like, so I guess it's a bit of a spoiler as to whether or not I actually like this game. But let's find out to what degree I like it and which things I like in particular. Um, Other than that, it's mostly in random order. So let's start with the first thing I like. I like the new units, and not just the sculpts, but also what they do. The assault gun is a dedicated tank killer. It can target tanks both in offense and defense. And the Katyusha is also a fun unit mostly because of its bombardment ability, and yeah, that adds something to the game as well. You can actually drive it into a battle. You can even drive it into an enemy occupied area. It needs to have been friendly control since the start of the Soviet movement phase. So as far as that's concerned, I find it to be well balanced, and they're also very useful firing from across the Volga, which is in actuality also what happened a lot. So I found that to be a good tactic in this game as well, to just place a number of Katyushas on the far side of the Volga and just target the units inside the city. Now, what else do I like? I like the assault battle mechanic. Um, yeah, and also, like you can use bombers in assaults, but not in battles. The fact that you're locked in battle, which is, really fitting for a battle like Stalingrad. You couldn't just break through. It was often said that. I don't remember the exact thing they said, but it was something like they fought over Pavlov's house as long as the entire campaign for France, like it wasn't entirely like that, but it's certainly what it felt like. And so you can be locked in battle for a number of turns. Yeah, so it's a nice mechanic, I think. Thirdly, there are a number of clever little rules, such as road movement. The nose, I've put the three here on a road. You can move +2. In my latest playthrough, I found myself to be making a mistake from time to time. I think in North Africa it was like you could move 5 areas, so I just assumed that it would be the same, even though the rulebook clearly says it doesn't. You get +2 movement and not 5 movement, so mostly that means 4, obviously, for um, mechanized infantry and tanks, but I like how that works. Also, the no step back rule, I'm sure that was needed in the beginning, otherwise the Germans wouldn't have a chance whatsoever to break through the Russian lines if you could just add a few Russians to certain areas. So the no step back rule was really clever and also fitting historically. The force multiplier, that's perhaps the most inventive and innovative clever little rule that was added to this game. That's when you move either a regular infantry from the region board onto the city board, and it's actually doubled, and the same goes for mechanized infantry, although, and that was another mistake I made, it's not double to 2 mechanized infantry, but to 1 mechanized, and you get 1 free regular infantry. But anyway, I think that's a very clever mechanic. Very innovative. Rear echelon as well for the Katyushas, as I already explained, and the targeting abilities. We know it from certain games of Axis and Allies clones from what's it called? Historical board gaming or so. Fan-made type of games, which quite often saw such units that can actually target, but now we see it. Well, of course, it was part of North Africa as well, but now we see it here too. What I also like is variable casualties, meaning like sometimes the attacker gets to choose, sometimes the defender gets to choose, for instance in ambushes, or depending on certain die rolls that are actually made, well, mostly in ambushes, but also the targeting abilities like I already mentioned, and also because of the force multiplier, you really want to, save as many infantry as possible, so you really don't want to always take an infantry as a casualty. Very often you'll take an artillery instead, or an assault gun. Very rarely will you actually choose tanks, I suppose. And I didn't put an airplane there, but in some cases, especially late game, it's even better to take an aircraft as a casualty and not a land unit, because you really need them if you're playing the Axis, especially. Um, what else? Well, I also like the optional rules that come with the game. I haven't tried them yet, but just the fact that they are there is a nice touch, and probably they were rules that that they were thinking of adding to the actual game, and then thought, no, this is probably adding too much unnecessary complexity, but let's give players the option to use them if they want to. So I always appreciate including a number of optional rules into the game. What I also like is the Russian reinforcement system. They have quite a few more RPCs than the Germans do for most of the game. But they're limited to placing one in this area, one in this area, and one in this area, and they can place as many as they want over here, and then they just need to abide by the stacking limits after the movement phase. But anyway, it's very clever that you can't just quite often the Soviets will have, like, I don't know, like 16 IPCs or something, and then they could just put 3 tank units here. Well, okay, not quite, but if they'd saved a few RPCs from the previous turn, then it would be pretty easy to overwhelm any German defender. So they can only place one at a time, unless, of course, they're launching Operation Uranus. So I think that's a very clever mechanic. And if the Germans think, okay, we're going to make the Russians fight, we're going to conquer this area early on, or this one, like any one of the reinforcement zones, then that restriction no longer counts, and the Russians can put as many units there as they want. So yeah, I think that's a very clever way they handled that. What I also like is Operation Uranus, and how the units are of variable strength, and also the number depending on the round in which you launch it. The sooner you launch it, yeah, you probably don't want to launch it in round 6, but I launched it twice in round 3, I mean, but I launched it twice in round 6, not because I really wanted to. I mean, the later you do it, the better, because you'll have more units, you'll have more cards. But yeah, sometimes you feel like you have to, because the Germans may be very close to taking all the territories on the city board, which means that they would score a total victory, assuming that they can still trade supply. But yeah, then you may have to launch it a bit sooner, and also, which cards do you draw? Where do you place them? Do you place them in the north? Do you place them in the south? So it will always look a bit different, and that makes it a lot of fun, because it adds to the replayability. Yeah, so Operation Winter Storm as well, same thing basically. Also, depending on when Operation Uranus is launched, 3 turns later, Operation Winter Storm is launched. But which units do you buy? How many RPCs do you have to spend? So it will always be slightly different. Although I think generally it's a good idea to buy a number of mechanized infantry and tank combinations that you can actually blitz with and quickly retake territory if the Russians are weak enough there. Probably along with 1 or 2 anti-tank guns and some regular infantry, but I found it to be a good purchase to buy, I don't know, if you can, like 3 mechanized infantry and 3 tanks. What else do we have? The Yeah, the ebb and flow of the game in general, I really like. At the start of the game, the Germans obviously have the upper hand, although they have to be very careful of how they plan their attacks and how they get into the city and which casualties to take, as I mentioned beforehand. Then when Operation Uranus is launched, obviously all of a sudden the tables will have turned, and the Soviets are, well, I don't know if they're in control, but they will definitely have the upper hand. Then Operation Winter's Storm is launched, and the Germans get to counterattack. And if they're a bit lucky, and if they planned it well, and if they're still strong enough, then the Russians might be back on the defensive. And towards the very end of the game, the Russians tend to be stronger again because they will be retaking more and more RPC areas, and they can still buy units, and the Germans won't have many left typically, and the Russians will be stronger again, but again most of the time they will again be limited to one such unit per area. So as I already said, I found that to be a very clever rule. I also like the different levels of victory, which keeps the game tense until the very end. At a certain point it will often become clear that even if you're playing the Germans well, that a total victory might be just beyond their grasp. But then you can still try for a major victory, and once that seems impossible, you can still try to hold on to Potomac being the Axis, and you will gain a minor victory still. And even though the victory conditions are different for the Russians, similar things are true for them as well. So it's not like like what happened in many previous Axis and Allies titles, that one side simply gives up before the end of the game because they feel like their situation is hopeless. You really want to keep on playing here until the end and see what level of victory you can still achieve. So that's definitely something I like very much. The fortified zones I also like. I've actually put a miniature from historical board games here as a bunker, but I like how that works, simply the original defender gets, even though that's not a term being used in the rule book, but it's the side that actually controls the area gets a bonus in defense, and not the other side. If you're not controlling the area, you don't get the defense bonus, and that works very nicely. That gives you a sense of how dangerous it can be to attack fortified positions. And the way to deal with that, obviously, if you possibly can, especially for the Germans, is to take out the Russians' supply via the not via the ice bridges, which you can see now because this was kind of the end of the game. But to take them out by taking out the ferries and putting the Russian units, if you can, in certain areas of the board out of supply, and then you get a -1 to defense, -1 to attack, meaning that if that were to happen in such a fortified area, the defenders would defend normally, and of course, if it happened outside of a fortified area, they would defend at a -1, and so that's really, again, a very clever mechanic, and I like how they handled that. Let's see, what else do we have? Well, the ferries and the ice bridges themselves as well. I recently read an article in Board Game Geek in which Matt Hyra explained the design and the all the decisions that and the things that were play tested. And apparently Larry Harris wanted to get rid of the ferries, but yeah, I really like them and how they work. For instance, because of what I just said, that it's a possibility to cut off supply and all of a sudden give you the upper hand in a combat, because the defender will have a -1, being the Russians, of course, in this particular case. And the ice bridges, well, once they're there, you can still destroy the unit on it, but you cannot destroy the ice bridge itself, which makes perfect sense, of course. I also like the supply lines and the supply tokens. Something Matt Hyra actually pointed out to me is at the very beginning of the game, over here in these two areas, Tinguda and Upganorovo Station. Over here, the Germans start out of supply, and what I tried to do was simply first try and win the battle for Upganorovo Station, which I actually managed to do once, but the Germans rolled really well on that particular occasion. But if you just drop a supply token into Tinguda, then they can fight normally as well, despite being out of supply. So that is still something I'm learning how to. To me, so far, it hasn't been necessary yet very often to actually use supply tokens, or sometimes perhaps I haven't seen the occasion, like in this particular example. But yeah, I like that mechanic very much. And also the supply lines in many Axis and Allies games, of course, you don't have such a thing as supply, and your forces could be totally surrounded and they would fight completely normally. Especially in Stalingrad, that wouldn't make any sense. I mean, as the Germans were actually surrounded, well, they were virtually unable to resist, and the Russians also barely held on for lack of supplies and lack of reinforcements and everything. So yeah, so it's great to have supply included in this game, as it was in North Africa. What I also really like is the ambush mechanic. You have ambush sites over here. You can place an infantry in there, and you get to basically launch a free attack against an enemy unit in an adjacent zone. And yeah, it symbolizes not only snipers but also booby traps and what have you. Molotov cocktails. So they're, yeah, a great way to do it. They could have used a card or whatever as a sniper attack or whatever, but this works, and also against tanks. So yeah, I really like that one. Very clever, very innovative. Um, the out of supply rules I like very much as well. As I already explained, that's the way to make the defender less strong, and also to make the attacker less strong if you can do the same thing to them, obviously. So great mechanic, really works very well and can have a major impact on the game if you can put the right units out of supply at the right time. The battle board is also something I like, and what they did to it, very clearly indicating what happens when a unit is unsupplied, or when you're attacking across a non-frozen river, or if you're attacking a fortified area. It's all clearly on there. It's great. There wasn't one in North Africa, even though it was explained and it made complete sense. That it's easier that way, without a battle board. Where did this unit come from? Was it a flanking attack or was it a regular attacker? So as far as that's concerned, it's better to leave them on the board in that particular game. But in this game, it's not necessary, and I'm glad the battle board made its return. I also like the rulebook. It is a bit wordy, perhaps in some cases. There could have been some tables or some bullet points or whatever, but it's not a problem. And of course, there are always going to be a few questions, but in many cases, and I have myself to blame for that. Most of the questions I actually asked on Board Game Geek turned out to be very clearly spelled out in the rules. I just missed them or something. But as far as I know, there have not been any errata or anything like that. So that means it's a great rule book. No mistakes so far that I've been able to spot. And yeah, of course, there are always going to be a few questions, and some of them make sense. But yeah, great rule book. Really happy with it. The order cards, yeah, like those as well. Certainly works. Could they have handled it differently? Yeah, sure they could have, but yeah, I think it makes it, once you've gone through the deck like 3 or 4 times, then it basically becomes second nature, although sometimes you have to be a bit careful because it's very easy to move on from the movement phase right away to the attack phase, and then you kind of forget to, sometimes, at least I do, to use the rocket launchers or mostly that, or the anti-air artillery fire. It's clearly spelled out on the card, but it's very tempting to just right away go from movement to attack. So you have to read the cards carefully, and it is actually on there, and it works great. Perhaps the thing that I like most about the game is the two different maps. You have a regional map, and a city map. Of course, most games on Stalingrad will just be the city proper. And if you do have a larger map, then it's usually Fall Blau or Case Blue, which covers the entire 1942 German summer campaign usually. I personally had this idea and wish myself to. Like, I hope they will make a Stalingrad game with two maps. And what do you know? That's actually what happened. So I'm incredibly happy with that decision, and I think it works great. And they've really found a completely natural and fast flowing way to make those two boards work side by side. I also like the fact that the game came with two scenarios, Operation Uranus and the Race for Stalingrad, which is the entire campaign. I haven't actually played Operation Uranus yet, but yeah, just the fact that it comes with two scenarios and that you don't just get one is fantastic in itself, obviously. I also like the different city zones. That works great, and it's got to do with the ferries and the ice bridges. So if you lose one, it doesn't necessarily mean that all your units are out of supply in the entire city, but just, partially in the city. And also how you enter the city. If you enter from the north, you don't end up here, but you end up in the north of the city too. So I think that's great too. And yeah, those are about the things that I really like about the game. Direct hits, I tend to call them. There are also a few things I like a little bit less. The first one is, well, this was more or less the situation at the end of my previous game. And as you can see, well, it was a major German victory because they held on to this area over here. And while still being able to trade supply out of the city. But you can see that the board is actually pretty empty. And on the regional board, you can see that had the game lasted one more turn, there probably wouldn't have been a single German unit left. No, sorry, I don't actually mean that. What I mean is that the Russians almost certainly would have won. What I don't like very much is that the board looks pretty empty, especially on the city board. In real life, I believe the Russians captured around 250,000 or 300,000 troops. Well, the number of troops that you actually have here on the board doesn't seem to be anywhere near that, and nor in the vicinity of Stalingrad. So that just feels a bit odd at the very end of the game to have so few units. Yeah, obviously the actual encirclement was a bit larger, but yeah, I don't see it here that there's such a big concentration of troops. Something else I wouldn't say disappointed, but I wouldn't have minded if this game had also come with 10-sided dice. That might have, made some differentiation between, for instance, the Axis minor units and the German units in this particular case. That they attack the same, they defend the same. It's just that there's no force multiplier. Otherwise, what they could have done is to, have the Axis miners defend on a 2 or something, and they could have made them a bit cheaper as well. Maybe, cost 2 instead of cost 3. So really a difference between the quality of the German troops and the Axis miners, which of course in real life actually existed. Related to that is that there is not really any real reason once the Axis minor units are destroyed to buy any new ones. I mean, they cost the same, they don't have the force multiplier. Why would you want to do that, I suppose it's a bit of a missed opportunity. Maybe they tried it out and it didn't work. I have no idea. And finally, something I think they could have done better is sometimes, there's so much space left on an order card. I would have liked, here it says, for instance, this is just an example, but Allied artillery fires air defense, and they only hit on a 1, but they could have added that there. Same for Allied ambushes fire, they could have added the fact, which is in the rule book, and after you've played it 2 or 3 times, you will actually remember, but I think it wouldn't have hurt. As I said, there's more than enough space available on the card to just put, like, ambushes fire on a 1, you choose the casualty. On a 2, the defender does. And air defense as well hits on a 1, because normally artillery hits on a 2, or even 3 2, right, when defending as well. And in this case, it's a 1. So it would have helped if it had actually been on the card. And then there are a few more cards like that, with which I had the same feeling. Finally, a few missing in actions. First of all, of course, what happened toward the end of the battle is that the Germans desperately tried to fly some troops out. Now, it may have to do with the scale of the game, I don't know, but it would have been nice if the Germans had some kind of incentive, perhaps, to fly out some troops, or gain some kind of victory point or an extra IPC. I don't know what, but something for flying out the troops. At least to me, when I think of the Battle of Stalingrad and when it came to its closing stages, that's something that really comes to mind. German troops desperately trying to make their way out of the city by aircraft. First via Gumrak and later via Potomnik as well. And that is something I don't see in this game. And finally, that's the last thing, the weather effects. It's great that there is some kind of weather effect in this game, don't get me wrong, but it only affects aircraft. And as far as I know, at least as many Axis troops were incapacitated by the weather and illness and disease, certainly during the later stages of the battle, than simply from becoming combat casualties. And that is something I don't see in the game. I can perfectly understand they didn't want to make that a regular rule. It might have made things a bit too complicated. Maybe as an optional rule, I don't know. Okay, so is this game better than North Africa? Well, I actually think that I'm a bit of two minds when it comes to this. My personal preference always goes out to the Eastern Front. I don't know why that is, but it's probably got to do with the sheer numbers, the enormous brutality and ruthlessness of the fighting, and it's just mind-boggling what happened on the Eastern Front. So it's always had my interest and attention more than other fronts, and certainly more than the North African front. So as far as that's concerned, I prefer this game. It's also probably slightly easier, even though I feel that some people, to my mind, exaggerate the difficulty of North Africa. It's really not that difficult to my taste, and this one, it's not that easy. There are a couple of little rules that are easy to forget, or that you first need to wrap your head around as well. In the beginning, there were many people claiming that this game was totally impossible to win for the Axis. Well, I certainly didn't have that impression, but you need to know how to play the game and how to use the German units rightly. I do admit that it's actually more difficult to play the Germans in this game than it is to play the Russians, because it's much more unforgiving when you play the Germans, play the Axis, and then you make a couple of important mistakes, and it might be extremely difficult to recover from them, and that's easier for the Russians. So as far as that's concerned, my personal preference, theme-wise, goes to this one. But game-wise, rule-wise, I really also love North Africa, especially the convoy rules and how they work, and that you constantly, get different units and you sink different units. And I love that game as well. So it's actually a very difficult choice, and it's hard for me to pick a winner. So please pick your own. What I do want to say is that these latest two editions are, in my book, the best two Axis and Allies games to date. They're very historical. They have somewhat more rules, but you actually have the idea that you're playing this particular battle, and not just I don't know. Sometimes in the Guadalcanal game, for instance, what I know about the Battle of Guadalcanal, other than that there were certainly naval engagements. The Japanese consistently trying to land troops onto the island. And the Americans pushed them back, and then there was a lot of fighting going on that particular island. But in the game, the Japanese are thrown off the island on the very first American turn, never to return. In the global game, in the Europe games, Russia has very few IPCs, and which may have been somewhat accurate at the beginning of the war, but certainly not as the war progressed. And yeah, that is something that has been, somewhat annoying me. That if you read a bit about the war, if you watch lots of documentaries, etc., you will think, this doesn't make any sense. This is not historical. And you will always find such things. And you, of course, always need to strike a balance between historical accuracy and playability. But yeah, I think that these latest two editions have done a fantastic job. What I'd like to see next, because of course, once you have a new game, you're already thinking which one is going to be next. When they first had the poll up, then you could choose between North Africa, Stalingrad, Eastern Front, whatever that is. Is it another operational battle, such as Kursk, perhaps, or Bagration, or is it going to be like Operation Barbarossa or so? I don't know. And Market Garden was there as well. Well, I'll take any of those games, of the ones that are still remaining. But my personal preference at this point would be to see a Pacific battle, perhaps Okinawa or Peleliu or Iwo Jima. Those would be great games, and I'd love to see them because the Pacific Front has not received any attention yet so far, which I hope it will. So I hope you've enjoyed this review, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thank you for watching.